Hello and welcome to the Books on Asia podcast, sponsored by Stonebridge Press, publisher of fine books on Asia for over 30 years, located at www.stonebridge.com. And I'm your host, Amy Chavez. Michael Pronko is a Tokyo-based writer of murder, memoir, and music, and he is professor of American literature at Meiji Gakuin University. During his over 20 years in the country, he has written for Newsweek Japan, The Japan Times, and Artscape Japan, and he's been featured on NHK TV and Nippon Television. He also runs the website Jazz in Japan, which covers the vibrant jazz scene in Tokyo and Yokohama. Today, we're going to talk about Pronko's detective fiction, as well as his nonfiction books, including his most recently released Tokyo Tempos. This podcast is brought to you by Stonebridge Press, publisher of quality books on Japan and Asia for over 30 years. So, welcome, Michael Pronko.
Thank you for having me today. It's a pleasure.
It's great to have you on here because I have seen your books around forever. Your detective Hiroshi series, you've got those bright red covers and there's a lot of action. And of course now with the Netflix series on Tokyo, including Tokyo Vice and also Tokyo Swindler. I think your books are really, really on point right now. And now I want to start, though, with your Tokyo Tempos, which is your most recently released book, which was released when?
December 20th, I think. Yeah, before Christmas. Yeah.
Congratulations. And when I started reading it, that's when I read your lengthy and informative introduction. That's when I realized that it was a series of nonfiction titles called Tokyo Moments, right? So so the new one is Tokyo Tempos, and it's the fourth, right?
Yes, it's the fourth one, right? Yeah.
Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about the series in general and how you got into writing that?
Yeah, well, I've been writing those essays, kind of short essays, for a long time. It was originally a column in Newsweek Japan, and I got asked because I was writing for an online magazine, Tokyo Q, which kind of collapsed under its own weight years ago. But I wrote a small column there about reactions to Tokyo. I went to Newsweek Japan and wrote columns for them for about 11 or 12 years. And once a month, it was they had a rotating group of foreigners, I think they call the column the Foreign Eye or Tokyo Eye, I believe. And so what was the kind of foreigner's point of view on Japan? And I, had originally kind of thinking of writing for people outside Japan, non-Japanese, but Newsweek Japan and the readers love that column, because kind of foreigners see the city so differently from Japanese. And I really enjoyed that. The editors there were really great editors at Newsweek Japan. And then that led to a book. A small publisher said, let's collect these and put it out. And I knew the answer to that, which is yes, I will. So originally they came out in Japanese as a collection. I had the English, of course. Then after I stopped writing for Newsweek Japan, I just kept writing those columns. I kind of moved over to other writing for Japan Times and other places.
Right. And that kind of writing used to be quite popular. As you know, I myself also wrote a column about life in Japan for the Japan Times.
Right.
And when I started reading your book, it was like deja vu because there were a lot of the same topics.
Right.
Even though you're in Tokyo, I also have a post office, right? So when I go into the post office, I have a similar experience to yours. But what I liked about yours is I was limited to like 800 words,
right,
where yours are longer and you go into a bit more depth.
That's right. The original ones that I wrote were also limited to 800 words for Newsweek Japan, right? It's got to fit on one page with an illustration. But as I sort of wrote them not for Newsweek Japan, and a couple of reviewers and readers who wrote reviews on Amazon and things, they kind of said, oh, well, I wish it was longer. I wish he'd write a longer one. I thought, well, I can do that. So, so I just kind of tried to let it find its own length, I guess.
So you were telling me you're on sabbatical.
Yes.
And that's from Meiji Gakuin University, right?
That's right. Meiji Gakuin University. Uh-huh.
And so you're concentrating on your writing even more. And you were saying you have been putting out one book per year for quite a while now. I'm amazed. That's just, I mean, these are pretty lengthy books as well. I mean, they're, standard 250, 280 pages. And I can't imagine that kind of output myself. Yet you also do all your own promotion and you do podcasts, you get reviewers. You're like this amazing one-man band machine that does all these amazing things. And I'm a bit, afraid of what's going to happen on your sabbatical. You're going to put like a 10-volume set out.
Well, you kind of get about the same amount of work done. I mean, like things, time, is taken up by this, that, and the other. But it is a little hard balancing everything. I mean, university work is, a lot of stuff all the time and little details and meetings and, But, it kind of goes together. William Carlos Williams, great American poet, was a medical doctor. And he wrote a beautiful essay which kind of said, he couldn't be a doctor without writing poetry, and he couldn't write poetry without having a doctor, right? So those things go together. In terms of managing time, I mean, that's a headache for everybody on the planet, I think. Nobody says, oh, I got way too much time on my hands. So
no, they don't.
For years, I was writing columns like for Japan Times. I was writing about jazz. I was writing for Newsweek, writing for these different things, doing academic writing. So that just kind of got me to the point where I would just produce things because, writing for the newspaper,
yeah.
I mean, the deadline is whatever, Thursday at 11 a.m. So you can't watch TV or you got to turn it in at 11 o'clock. So I just kind of took some of that, writing for the media and kind of transferred it to writing novels. But I've had about one collection of essays or one novel a year for about 10 years. Is that right? Yeah, about the last 10 years. So.
That's very impressive. Very impressive. And how did you get into writing fiction? I mean, I think nonfiction is kind of a no-brainer. When a foreigner comes to Japan, they're suddenly put into this world that they never imagined before. And if you're a writer, you naturally want to write it down. And even my columns started with letters to friends at home. And then I started the column with the Japan Times. But fiction, that's a different animal, It takes quite a bit of different kind of talent to write fiction.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's a lot of overlap, of course. If you're writing nonfiction, you got to describe where you are. There's interesting people. There's conversations that you put in. So novels, of course, are longer, but if you break the novel down into pieces, it would be like 80 columns or 40 newspaper columns, something like that. So I tend to think of that in small pieces. But I teach fiction, right? So, at university, I teach novels and film. And so I've always outlined the novels, outlined the film, and work with students to try to get them to outline it so that they can understand, how fiction works. I had done that for years and years. Also taught a lot of poetry, film. You see a film differently than a novel. And so all of that kind of came together into the detective series.
I started Shitamachi Scam, and which is what number book is that in your series?
That's number 6, I guess.
The most recent one, right?
Most recent, right.
There's a lot going on in the first chapter, but I think that this is also about sagi, right, which is a type of Japanese crime. Maybe you could explain it a little better than I could.
Sure, yeah. That novel is about scam, so I call it Shitamachi Scam. I wanted to call it sagi, but sagi is, foreign words are hard sometimes for readers, but...
And it could be a heron too, couldn't it?
It could be a heron too, right? And Maji, you never know. A beautiful set of poetry about nature. But But no, it's set in Shitamachi, right? The kind of lower town of Tokyo, the kind of older, quote unquote, older part of Tokyo. And it's about cheating elderly people out of their savings.
Which is a huge problem in Japan.
It's a giant problem, right? And you see posters and signs everywhere, like, be careful, don't let anybody, it's a huge problem. And I think they've done pretty well to kind of try to keep it under control. But I just thought that was such an outrageous thing to do.
Yeah, I think your book does a good job, too, of kind of explaining why it happens. And which I thought was interesting because I hadn't actually thought about it, right? And, these elderly people, they're isolated. They're, they may not have all the mental capabilities or even someone to turn to ask, or maybe the community. They don't have a tight-knit community to talk about these things. And you kind of set up that quite well with your Silver Center.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I think there's a lot of things with elderly, and I guess I was kind of thinking ahead to my own old age, but also like, there's a lot, isolation, being lonesome, that sense, you read every so often of some person that dies in their apartment and they are not found for, months or something. And it's just kind of heartbreaking, and so that's an aspect of Tokyo life, which is... It
happens everywhere, too. They come to our island, those Saigi people, and they sell all elderly people $3,000 futons.
Oh, gosh, how outrageous.
And it is.
A friend of mine's father-in-law had bought all of these candies from someplace, he got on and they just send them 5,000 yen of candy every month. And it was all stacked up in his apartment, and he and his wife, who's Japanese, hadn't been there in a while. And then they get there and here's like thousands and thousands of boxes of candy that he will never eat, but that he paid for, right? So, yeah, it's not like directly harmful, but it's pretty harmful, pretty pernicious.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. So that's really good. The other point that I thought was interesting that I never would have thought of was that you were talking about the elderly and how, the mind starts going, and the fact that the elderly may not remember what the voice of their grandchild sounds like.
That's right.
So when they call and say, send money, or something, they do it because they think, that's really their grandson. And they probably are also borrowing a bit of the grandson's profile as well. And they may know him or have found out who he is, right?
Maybe know the basics. Where does it work? Yeah.
The basics, right. Yeah. And that's all you would really need. It was kind of funny. This is a bit off topic, but I'm watching the Australian Open tennis now on TV. And they have a commercial where this older woman, she's probably only in her 60s, but she gets a text message, "Mom, please send money."
Oh.
And it's an advertisement to how you can send money over the phone. And the last pictures of her pushing send money. And I thought, I don't think they'd have that in Japan.
No.
That particular advertisement.
Right. That gets shut down, right? There's so many potential victims, I guess, that people kind of want to make money in an easy way, and they don't mind, the ethics of it and morality of it. And so I try to get some of that into the novel, right? Just that ethical component. I feel like, a lot of detective novels, mysteries, thrillers, whatever, do have that ethical element. It's not that there's a happy ending so much as there's some disorder in society that needs to be resolved somehow. The other novels also have that kind of inquiry, I guess, or investigation of the ethics of life in Tokyo. Yeah.
So your other novels then, are they all focused on a certain element of Japanese culture or crime as well?
Yeah, there's always a crime, of course, and some of the characters stay the same detectives, but shift around a little bit. So other ones have explored things like the work culture, overwork, Burakukigyo, the black companies, as they're called in Japanese, that, force people to work overtime without pay. One that I'm looking at now writing now is about the entrance exam, the pressure on kids to perform and get into a good school, and how that feeds into the hierarchy of society. Yeah, human trafficking, real estate deals, a whole bunch of different things.
Okay, so that sounds like a great way to gain an insight into Japanese culture.
I think so, because, they're all set in Tokyo. They give a little bit different view than oh, look how fun and nice Japan is. It's such a clean, safe place, and it, Japan is a clean and safe place, but there's also,
organized crime. Yeah, that's right.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's not always Yakuza either, I think.
No. Yeah, they're kind of on the way out a little bit, there's kind of just the day-to-day crime of all kind of various different things. So that's all there. And so I hope that gives a kind of more balanced picture of Japan.
So far, what has been the most popular of your Detective Hiroshi series? And what was going on in Japan at the time?
Real estate comes into two different books. One, the first in the series, called The Last Train, I think has been one of the most popular ones. It has a really vengeful but powerful female character, and she's not doing the crimes per se, but getting revenge for crimes done and real estate. And I think everybody likes that character, right? She's Michiko is the main character's name, and she's very, kind of tough, but really likable, I think. And she's very different, I think, from the kind of traditional stereotype of Japanese women as being whatever, soft and pliant, or whatever that image is. She's quite different from that.
So in your introduction, you said that you write about Tokyo, but you also say you like Japan's countryside. And I write about Japan's countryside, but I like the cities too.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, if you were to write about Japan's countryside, what would you write about? And how would you think it would be different from Tokyo?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I have a kind of culture shock when I go to the countryside. Just this slow pace of life. You just have to wait for things, right? I mean, Tokyo is kind of built on impatience, right? You go into a ramen place, they deliver your bowl immediately, you pay, you're out the door, right? But that would never happen in the countryside. You'd sit, you might chat with the wait staff, or ask a question, or how do I get here, or how long has it been here? So the other thing about the countryside is this just different relation to nature, which I really like, and kind of no matter where you go or where you are, you're just so much closer to, mountains and rivers. And also that's kind of a central part of how like smaller towns are set up, just to have that right there. And we often go to onsen, hot springs, and the hot springs is kind of enjoy nature in the middle of nature, not
right,
from
the real nature.
Yeah, you're like right there. It's on your body, sort of. And
so when you go out to the countryside, do you go to places outside of Tokyo?
Yes. We'll go to a hot springs resort, or, I know it's like over touristed, but Kyoto still remains a kind of amazing place to me. And outside Kyoto too, there's so many little places that are not packed with tourists. So you can kind of find the old feeling of Kyoto, of just kind of quiet and calm. That's not the countryside, but...
Do you have any recommendations of places people could visit to get away from the crowds?
I would say, well, at least around Tokyo, you can go to like Mount Takao, which is still a lot of people walking around, but it's a beautiful mountain to the west of Tokyo. it feels not city-ish at all, although I think technically it's inside Tokyo-to. But Kamakura is also kind of over-touristed. But again, like with Kyoto, you can kind of get away from the crowds if you plan a little bit.
Okay. I will skip to our last question. And I always ask authors what their favorite 3 books on Japan are.
Yeah. Oh, God. I don't think I can reduce it to
It's not
3,
fair, is it?
If I can, that's just totally unfair. Well, let me answer it twice. How about that?
Okay.
But I think one of the books that really impressed me before I came to Japan is The Empire of Signs by Roland Barthes. And this was a book that he wrote in the 70s or 60s, maybe, and about the kind of meaning that he saw in the everyday life. And that book, really, Empire of Signs, I think, is reflection on life. It focuses on Tokyo mostly, but not entirely. So that book really impressed me. Another one that I thought really got to the psyche of Japan is Anatomy of Dependence. It's a book written by psychiatrist Takeo, I believe is the name. It looks at the Japanese idea of amai, right? So amairu, right? To be spoiled or to be in a relationship of dependence, kind of trying to see both the good side and the bad side of Japanese psychology. Let's see what else influenced me. Well, I like books on Zen. I still read a lot about Zen Buddhism. And so I think the first books that I read at college were like D.T. Suzuki. Maybe he's a little out of fashion now, but, he was just on all the bookshelves of the cool people at college, I felt like. And I still read a lot about Zen. So there's 3, but let me add a couple more people that I really like, because I can't just say those. I like the writing of Donald Ritchie. He's just such a great writer, and he just seems to really have sunk deeply into Japan and life here, and really lived that life here. And that always knocks me out. And Robert Whiting, too, is that book he wrote, You Gotta Have Wa. Years ago, I thought, wow, now that's a way to look at life here, and his other book, Tokyo Junkie, is great too. I think I sneaked in more than 3 there. I could kind of keep going here, but let me.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, I'm afraid we've run out of time, but it has been a pleasure talking to you, Michael Pronko. Do not miss Pronko's books. You can get them on Amazon for sure, as well as probably Kinokuniya and some other bookstores. His most recent release is Tokyo Moments. You can find him on social media at his website, michaelpronko.com, on Facebook as Pronko Author, on Twitter, I guess that's X, as Pronko Michael, and on Instagram as Michael Pronko. Okay, well, thank you so much, and let me know when your next book is out, okay?
I definitely will. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me. It's always fun to talk about Japan and Tokyo, and thanks so much.
You've been listening to the Books on Asia podcast, produced and edited by Amy Chavez and Michael Palmer, logo by Alex Kerr. Sponsored by Stonebridge Press, publisher of fine books on Asia for over 30 years. They can be found at www.stonebridge.com. And I'm your podcast host, Amy Chavez, author of Amy's Guide to Best Behavior in Japan and The Widow, the Priest, and the Octopus Hunter, Discovering a Lost Way of Life on a Secluded Japanese Island. For more interviews, book reviews, and other features, visit the Books on Asia website at booksonasia.net.